Welcome to FinFactor. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at Dry Run Cash Flow Forecasting Software, where we help the office of the CFO leave spreadsheets behind and model everything from cash flow through to complex scenarios with clarity and control. And joining me today is Robert Siciliano, a security analyst, best-selling author, and one of the leading educators in personal and corporate protection. And today we'll explore how AI-driven scams and sophisticated wire fraud have turned the human element into a company's most expensive liability, and how finance leaders can move beyond the human blind spot to safeguard every transaction, employee, and executive decision. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
So this is a huge topic, scams, fraud, everything, massive topic. We have, our inboxes feel full every day. One of my team is reporting phishing, like once a day. So we all know that this is a really big issue. Obviously, like it's such a massive issue. We hear stories of people, getting taken in by these fraudulent activities. I guess I want to put it this way: how do sophisticated people or smart people that know about this still fall for these fraudulent activities?
I spend a lot of time working with victims of crime, right? And these are people that, from all walks of life, all ages, all, positions in organizations and so forth. And 100% of the time, they say to me at the conclusion, as they're experiencing the shame of being victimized, they say, "How could I be so stupid?" And my response to that is, I don't think that anybody who is victimized in that regard is stupid at all. I think they're just simply human. And the predators, the bad actors, they just simply understand what makes us choose and decide, essentially what makes us tick. And if we don't understand ourselves, they say know thyself. If we don't understand ourselves and what makes us choose and decide in this regard, then it's just a matter of time until they get you. So it's not a matter of being stupid. It's simply just being or ill-informed, right? And I don't know that the majority of us are up to speed with our own digital literacy when it comes to cybersecurity. I don't know that most organizations spend enough time, energy, or effort in educating and informing their employees on fraud prevention. I know that they all, to a degree, and when I say all, I mean like 60%, provide compliance-based regulatory type phishing simulation training, which is necessary and it's good in regards to, relatively solving the job of preventing phishing. Yeah. But if that training occurs, it's once a year, maybe quarterly. And sometimes they provide, micro e-learning, which is better. But in the end, that phishing simulation training doesn't necessarily solve the human factor in regards to effectively recognizing risk emotionally. Phishing simulation training is look at this, look for this, don't do this, or else. And that really isn't effective in actually getting the human to effectively recognize risk, both personally and, of course, professionally.
Well, and I know we talk about it in our team a lot because we're just very cautious and we know it's so prevalent. And yet I almost got caught last year on one, and it just was one of these things where the message just actually lined up with the conversation I just had. It all sort of made sense. And fortunately, something triggered and I figured it out, and rushing to kind of close all the doors and everything. And fortunately it worked out fine, but it was such a lesson on, oh my God, like how close we came to getting sucked in, where it just was probably a series of unlucky things all came together, but I still should have been verifying 5 different ways kind of thing. And so we learned a valuable lesson from that. But then, time makes those lessons not quite as fresh, right? So how do you change, I guess, a mindset of a team to say you have to stay vigilant. You're not being overly cautious. Like you need to stay, like, how do you change that mindset that it's okay to feel like your number one priority is protecting, not worrying about being overly cautious.
So reflecting on what happened to you, that happened to me 2 weeks ago. I just talked to a client. They said, we're sending you a Chase payment. Look out for it. A half an hour later, I get a notification from Chase regarding a payment. Hello.
Yeah.
I don't call that coincidence. I call that's what they're doing. I mean, that is the process. They're sending out millions and millions of emails every single day. Chances are you're going to talk to a client that's sending you a Chase payment. It's just a matter of time. Like, that's how that works. All that said, okay, so to get everybody up to speed, first and foremost, we talked about know thyself, right? It's important that we understand, all of us, that every single one of us, we talked about, I felt so stupid. We all have what I call, and I've been doing what I do now for 30 plus years professionally, 40 years, really since I was a teen, okay? We all have what's called, and I've developed this over the course of a lifetime, I call it the human blind spot, okay? So the human blind spot is our default to trust one another. It's that psychological and truly biological instinct to trust each other. We are an interdependent species. We depend on each other for our survival. Man needs woman, woman needs man, by the end of the day, to procreate. And the basis of that is we've got to trust each other in order for that to happen, okay? And so that trusting by default essentially is a cognitive gap. It's where biological trust overrides most forms of suspicion, and that leaves the door wide open for all kinds of fraud and deception. And now with AI and deep fakes, forget about it, right? So that biological default to trust essentially leads to the psychological shortcuts or the heuristics the criminals use to bypass our human logic and basically affect us emotionally using what we call manufactured urgency. So most of the scams you see today, I would say 9 out of 10 of them, there's like some type of an urgent message where like they just paid a bill or a bill was just paid via a PayPal account. Call this number if you don't think you should have to pay this bill. Whoa, I don't want to pay that bill. I'm calling the number. Or you get a pop-up from Amazon or Apple that says, hey, there's a problem with your computer. Just call us at this number. And once you make that phone call, if you don't even know that that's not already fraud and you make the call, you're already done, And that's a big deal. And most of us aren't paying all that much attention to this stuff because we don't want to first believe that we would ever be victimized to begin with. Like, security goes against most of our core belief systems. First and foremost, we've got to trust. Trusting means, I believe you. You have my best interest in mind. Not trusting means there are predators and thieves out there that want to hurt or harm me, but I don't want to think about those things to begin with. I would rather think that everybody's nice and good and kind. It just feels better to trust. So it just kind of goes against our core beliefs. So once I get all of that out of the way, because that's really important. It's not a matter of look at these links, hover your mouse over the URL, look for the scammer grammar. Like, all of that is necessary, but that's like putting the cart before the horse. You've got to kind of get into why we do what we do and how they get to us and what ultimately we need to become. Like, literally, it's not what to look out for. It's what we need to become so that we effectively recognize risk. Okay. And in order to achieve that, right, again, it's breaking down all of the issues biologically that make us susceptible to risk. And that begins with the human blind spot, right? And then from there, it's understanding what I call PDF. And PDF is paranoia, denial, and fatalism. So you say, well, what does paranoia, denial, and fatalism have to do with security? Well, it has a lot to do with it because these are, this is like a vicious circle of a loop that I call that makes us actually deny the existence of risk. Okay, so if I tell an audience of 100 people, which is actually true, I've got 20 security cameras in my home. I do. Between the outside of my home and the inside of my home, in each corner, there might be 1 or 2, or even 3 on some corners, and then the inside of the house. If I tell an audience of 100 people, I got 100 security cameras. I'm sorry, 20 security cameras. What might that say Or what might you think about my disposition, my outlook, my worldview? I wake up every day, I've got 20 security cameras. I must be what?
Paranoid. Yeah.
Paranoid. Yeah.
That's what they're thinking. Yeah.
Well, okay, so here's the deal with that. Paranoia is a mental health disease, is what it is. It is the unjustified perspective that people are out to get you, that you're being persecuted. That's what paranoia actually is by definition. But we as a culture, we as a society, we associate paranoia, a mental health issue, with actual security, which is getting control, putting systems in place, managing risk. So when you have an entire culture that looks at security as ultimately a bad thing, why would you want to engage in security to begin with? And that is 90% of the CFO's colleagues, their employees, sometimes their COO, sometimes their CEO. They look at security as a bad thing. So until you actually disrupt that, interrupt that pattern, right? Until you actually explain, no, security is about managing risk, but you have to actually break down their belief systems before they actually truly understand that. And how do you do that? Well, you do that by asking a number of different questions. And some of the questions are like, okay, so how many of you have a home security system? And if I get 15% of the room to raise their hand, that's a lot. And so the 85%, okay, so why don't you have the home security system? And the common answers are, well, we don't have a home security system in my house because I don't want to live like that. What does that mean? Well, they say, I don't want to worry. I don't want to live in fear. I don't want to be paranoid. As if engaging in the process of managing risk and installing hardware in your house is going to make you mentally ill. But once you break that down, and once they see how kind of ridiculous that is, they begin to recognize, okay, so what actually is security? I want to know now. And then now you go through the process of explaining, okay, so how many of you actually have a different passcode across all your critical accounts? If I get 10% of the room to raise their hand, that's a lot, which means 90% are using the same passcode. They're like, whoa. And then I say, okay, did you know that there are 300 billion of our credentials on the dark web? Like, did you know that? Like names, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, usernames, about 20 billion passwords. Did you know that? And then I didn't know that. And then I actually show them, I take them on the dark web in real time to Russian forums, and I show them their passwords on the dark web. And they're like, whoa, I did not know this because my CISO, my CISO, my CTO, my CIO, my CFO never told me this. I didn't know that this was real. Well, why would your CFO ever tell you this? Because maybe if you really want to get people on board to drink the Kool-Aid of security, you actually have to show them what the risks are in their own lives, because that's where it begins. So you ask the question, how do you get people to consistently engage in security practices? You start with them, literally them. So what's important to you? What's important to me? My honey, my kids, right? My children's digital footprint. My passwords are more important than the company passwords. My bank account's more important than the company bank account. My social security number and my identity and my credit cards, way more important than the corporate cloud. Start with the individual. You start with the human. You start with the employee as a family person. Somebody who is concerned about their own stuff. We are a selfish, self-interested creature. There's a reason why the flight attendant says put the mask on yourself first, because you are more effective when you take care of yourself first so you can take care of others afterwards. Well, the premise of all information security or security awareness training should be start with the individual where they're at in their lives. And once you do that, they take the information home. I call it the kitchen table effect. And they teach it to their family, cementing those lessons for life, thereby making the employee that much more aware going forward.
Mhm.
which we don't do, which I do, but I don't see it done anywhere else, especially not with compliance-based phishing simulation training in a corporate environment. So they
Yeah.
bring me in when they say, okay, we've kind of reached a plateau with the whole phishing thing. You know, we need our employees to care. How do you make them care? Well, that's how you do it.
Well, and, having heard some of the horror stories from other founders and other entrepreneurs that have had attacks that have really disrupted the businesses, there is of course there's a technical side, the CTO side is this, but the effects are almost always massive dollar effects. And that goes right into the CFO's office, right into the CEO's office. And the outcome is really negative for the company overall. And usually it is dollars is the number one thing, of course, that they're looking for. And so I think sometimes there needs to be probably even more buy-in right at the very top because it has to trickle downhill. Like you said, it can't just be, we're doing the checkbox. They're doing a little practice here or there. I think I imagine they just have to have that buy-in right from the top. There has to be probably a little bit of that fear right at the top so that everyone in the C-suite is on board with this. Everyone in the C-suite is like, yeah, this is a huge, huge issue.
So you use the word fear, and I get that. You know, I think really what the right word is there has to be buy-in regarding what security actually is versus isn't. Because while fear can be a motivator, I find that fear actually closes people down when it comes to this particular topic, right? So when we talk about, like paranoia, and we talk about denial, and we talk about fatalism, right? That the example that I provided, like I don't want to live like that. I don't want to have a home security system. Like that person literally would prefer to deny the existence of risk because she doesn't want to have to worry or live in fear. Nobody wants that. Fear is uncomfortable. So I just, I get to the granular level of all this stuff because what's I think even more effective is like going to that, CEO or COO and saying, listen, like as a CFO, my mom, my dad, they can't stop clicking links because we all have somebody like that in our lives. We all do. Yeah. Okay. So does the CEO. So does the COO. Right. So does marketing. Like everybody has a dad or a mom or a sister or somebody in their life that just can't stop picking up the phone when they get a pop-up that says it's Apple and it's not Apple. Like everybody does. And so you weave in your own life experience. Like my mom, she just can't stop. Like my dad passed away like 4 or 5 years ago, whatever. And my mom's been on like JDate, Plenty of Fish, Match.com. She's on Facebook. And like, some guy contacted her and said, he was in a colonel in the military in Afghanistan and found a trunk of money and needed her help to like get the money to the US. And once he did, they were going to like live happily ever after. And I got to tell my mom, like, no, like that's not a real thing. Like mom, but like, she's lonely and loneliness is a real thing. Like 25% of all human beings experience loneliness from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed. And they call it the pain and the ache of loneliness. And it's kind of like hunger pains. Like when you're really, really hungry, you will do almost anything to feed your body to get rid of that physical pain that you're experiencing. Well, the pain and the ache of loneliness is the same exact thing. And common sense goes out the window. Like Colonel in the US Army in Afghanistan needs you to help him get money. Like, but common sense doesn't matter here. It's loneliness. So this is like literally me as the CFO talking to the COO, right? Yeah. And like, that COO has a mom or a dad or a sister in the same boat. And so now it's like, then you say, guess what? 25% of our employees are lonely. 90% of them are using the same passcode across multiple accounts. 85% of them are not using two-factor authentication in their own personal lives. Like they don't get it. 85% of them don't have a home security system. We all have the same issues everywhere. Look at phishing simulation training is 15 years old. It's a relatively new addition to the corporate culture. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the solution to the problem. It's just what we've been using. I've been doing what I do, security awareness training, since 1992. I've come in contact with thousands of people, been on thousands of stages. I've looked people right in the eye, hugged them, cried with them, people who have been victimized. And what I've seen in 30 years is that humans haven't changed at all. We still deal with PDF, paranoia, denial, not going to happen to me, and fatalism. If they're going to break in, they're going to break in. What am I going to do? Why would I use a password manager if it can be hacked? Why would I get a credit freeze if they can hack the credit bureaus? Like, they use fatalism to justify denial and paranoia. That's everybody. That's humans.
Yeah. It's, this is really making me think, of course, because it is something that, of course, we can all relate to. We all have family, friends that have had struggles like this, and and then you start thinking about, like, we have a really, maybe you have a really large team, and it feels to me like I really like what you're saying, because the training, and it's like the technical training doesn't have the impact that stories do. The stories that's something that people can relate to, and it makes it feel real, which means the training feels real, right?
The current training that we do is a check the box, compliance based, get her done. It shows metrics, and it's the best we have at the moment, or at least that is on budget, that can let the regulators know that we did our job. But it's not necessarily making the employee care. And so our dialogue, I'm guessing, isn't what any of your audience is expecting when they think cybersecurity. But we're not engaging that employee when it comes to being at all kind or caring or empathetic to them when it comes to their worries and their fears regarding risk. Because risk is about predators and thieves. It's about sociopaths and psychopaths and hardcore narcissists whose full intent is to do harm. They want to hit you, hurt you, and harm you. They want your mother to be homeless, on the street, broke or dead, literally, because they want all of her money, and they don't care if she starves. That's what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with a phishing email. We're not dealing with a typo or scammergrammer. We're dealing with human predators that mean to do harm. In the course of your life, 97% of all the people that you will ever meet are worthy of your trust. They're good people with good intentions. But do your own research. As much as 3% of women and as much as 6% of men are considered by the medical communities as psychopaths and sociopaths. Again, these are the hardcore narcissists that experience no empathy, no sympathy, no guilt, no remorse. They truly have no shame. They're the ones sending the emails, the wrong number texts, right? They're the ones that are calling up all day, every day with ruses and scams. And they're the ones that we have to be on guard. But again, we don't want to think it's going to happen to us. We would just rather, not have to think about those things. So again, once you break them down, once you challenge their belief systems, once they understand truly what risk actually is, all of a sudden they're like, whoa, like, I didn't know any of this. And you know why they didn't know any of it? Because nobody ever told them it. Because their CISO never sat them down and explained this to them. The CISO hires me when they say we've reached a plateau. And I go in the room, and this is what happens, Blaine. It's the funniest thing ever. Because when I walk in the room, they introduce me. I don't really get much in the way of applause because they're not really happy to see me to begin with. Like, they're looking at me, like, literally, if you're looking at this on video, with their arms crossed, right, with a scowl on their face. And they're looking at me going, okay, security guy, what are you going to tell me that I don't already know? And then they're checking their watch or their phone, and they're like, I got to get out of here. I got things to do. Right. Yeah. And so as I start to ask these challenging questions about the passwords, about the two-factor authentication, about the password managers, about, the home security systems, they're like, whoa, like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Like, he's talking about me. He's talking about, like, what worries and concerns me. And all of a sudden, like, what happens is, like, the eyes begin to open up a little bit. the scowl kind of goes away a little bit, right? And then they literally, like, it's funny to watch because they literally physically, like in their chair, kind of move into the conversation, like their head gets a little closer to me, which is so fun. And then as the arms begin to like uncross and go down by their side or on their lap, you know what happens next? The hands go up because they got questions, right? Yeah. It's the greatest thing because as they have questions, like, okay, sir, you have a question. Yes. And he says, this, and that. Okay, good. And ma'am, you had a question too. Oh, he just asked it for me. You see, they all have the same questions that they've never had an opportunity to ask ever. And they have CISOs and CIOs and CTOs like literally in the company whose job it is to mitigate all of those risks, but they've never made themselves accessible to actually get those questions asked and answered. Like literally, you have some of the most secure beings on the planet in all of these corporations that have never made themselves accessible. And I think it's a real shame, actually, but it's also a great opportunity. And if you take advantage of like the fact that everybody's got these same questions, they've all got family with the same worries and issues, they've all got the same concerns, before you know it, like you've got a corporate culture that like they see it as we're all in it together versus this is a phishing email. If you click it and you get the organization in trouble, we're going to fire you, which is really what the corporate culture is right now when it comes to security awareness.
Yeah, which doesn't seem overly effective, right? Like that doesn't feel like it's going to work, and I can see that it's that same pushback, I guess, and reaction is what I think with the C-suite scene when they come in and the CTO saying, okay, we're going to have to move to a password manager and two-factor on everything and unique passwords, and everyone groans, but I think setting that stage and getting them to relate to it is so important, because if you get that buy-in, then it's going to flow, then it's going to work.
It's the buy-in. And, look at this process involves, understanding our human, fallibility, our vulnerability, right? And then it's a basic mindset that we develop in the course of a training, right? And that mindset is what I call, and I've been doing this now for 30 plus years, it's called the strategic human firewall. Okay. So as you know, traditional firewalls filter traffic, right? And human firewalls filter intent. Okay. So I would imagine that you being a professional, that you getting, and seeing, dozens of, phishing attempts every week, that you're already a strategic human firewall. Like you're looking for it. Like you're conscious of every time the phone rings, an email comes in, you get a text message, like you're kind of like fleshing it out on the fly. Like you kind of see, okay, that's not my registry of motor vehicles sending me a text message that my driver's license is at risk if I don't pay a fine. Like I know this one, like that's BS. Like you're like, bang. Like you're not dealing with any of that BS. You don't have time for any of that. So your radar, your BS radar has been up for probably years. Right? Because, you're a professional. This is what you do. You're paying attention. You're involved in finance to begin with. Like you've already been trained, But 90% of the general public doesn't. They just don't. But they can easily. And all they need is buy-in. So the strategic human firewall essentially is a mindset that's designed fundamentally to block deception. And that's a relatively easy thing to do once you have buy-in, right? It's a proactive governance. It's a mindset that turns employees from most of them being passive targets to active detection layers. Like they're looking for it, And it's the shift from, by default, I trust what I see because I have a human blind spot, to I verify everything. I'm looking for it. Okay. And essentially what this means is the employee evolves to what I call security appreciation. So for 30 years, I've been teaching security awareness training, which, that's like the generic form of what security is, or what security training is, security awareness training. I don't even sell or market security awareness in my brand at all any longer. I think security awareness has been destroyed by all these companies that provide phishing simulation training. They've destroyed security awareness training. I call it security appreciation training, because in order to buy in, you truly need to appreciate the value security has in your life. So it's the shift from awareness, which in your head is knowing, to appreciation, which is in your heart, which is caring. You want people to care about security. And so when employees appreciate how security protects, first and foremost, their own lives, that's when behavior changes permanently. Okay. So that chasm between an employee's intellectual understanding of risk, again, is awareness, and the emotional commitment to act on that knowledge is ultimately appreciation. And like I had mentioned, that's where the kitchen table effect comes in. So what do? Password managers, two-factor authentication, never use the same passcode twice. And I tell everybody, I can make you part of the top 10% of secure Americans if you do those three basic things, because 90% of the country isn't doing that. It's just so simple, And then from there, like they see, okay, so how do I protect my own identity? Credit freeze. A credit freeze has been around since 2008. Ask your C-suite colleagues, like literally, how many of you, like sit them down at a board meeting, how many of you have a credit freeze? And then be ready to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have a credit freeze now in 2026, it's free. It's available through the credit bureaus since 2018 or 19. It's been available since 2008. If you don't have a credit freeze now and you're making high six figures, you're a wealthy individual or well off, you're the top 5%, and you don't have a credit. What? Like, that's how much we don't care about security. We'd rather think it's not going to happen to me. Like that right there tells you everything that you need to know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing to me. And it's honestly, I guess we're in the top 10% because we have 2, sometimes 3-factor on everything. And we've got we do as much as we can. And it still feels to me like we're not doing enough, because there's just so much, so much going on all the time. I'm shocked that 90% of people are not taking some of what I would say is just like the very basic precautions. So Robert, this has been really, really insightful. How should people get hold of you if they want to talk with you and say, okay, this sounds like something I need for my organization?
Well, I would say start with checking me out on LinkedIn, Robert Siciliano, Siciliano. I am publishing something that gets your attention every couple of weeks. I've got thousands of people, checking out my newsletter. It's all about my methodology, my philosophy. I basically just give it away. You could do it yourself, certainly, but the nuances that I've accumulated over 30 years of getting in front of live audiences helps. Right. Otherwise, my website is, which is a great resource as well, is protectnowllc.com. Again, that's protectnowllc.com.
Okay, terrific. And I'll make sure that's down in the show notes. And thank you so much, Robert. I really appreciate it. It's a fascinating conversation and something that floats up top of mind for me every time I hear a horror story, especially from a friend or a colleague. So I really appreciate the time. And for those of you CFOs out there, if you're still buried in a spreadsheet, if your team is doing cash flow in spreadsheets today, we know that it's not boardroom ready visuals, but we also know that you need the control that the spreadsheet gives you to be able to give accurate forecasts to the boardroom, to the C-suite. We can give you both. We can give you fast, clear visualizations and give you the control you need to be able to model out virtually anything. So come and see us at dryrun.com.